Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
What happens when Hollywood's most disciplined warrior meets television's sharpest tongue in what was supposed to be a routine morning chat? What unfolds when a man who's spent 4 decades perfecting the art of control finally reaches his breaking point on live television? This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the story of the most explosive, most devastating, most utterly unforgettable confrontation in morning television history. A moment so raw, so visceral, so completely unscripted that it left an entire studio speechless and millions of viewers with their jaws on the floor. Tom Cruise. The name alone conjures images of impossible stunts, box office records, and a work ethic that's become legendary in an industry known for excess and ego. For 40 years, he's been the gold standard of professionalism, the man who does his own stunts, the actor who shows up 6 hours early, the star who treats crew members like family, a living icon who's navigated the treacherous waters of fame with grace, humility, and an iron will that's never once faltered in public. Until that morning, until Joy Behar decided to test just how far she could push. What you're about to witness is the moment when calculated provocation met decades of accumulated pressure, when a predatory question collided with a man who'd finally had enough, when the mask of celebrity composure shattered on live television, revealing something far more powerful underneath. Raw, unfiltered truth, delivered with the force of a man who'd spent a lifetime earning the right to speak it. The studio lights were bright that morning. The audience was buzzing with anticipation. The cameras were rolling. And nobody, not the producers frantically working their control boards, not the other hosts arranged in their familiar semicircle, not even Joy Behar herself had any idea they were about to witness television history. This is the story of what happened when Tom Cruise erupted. The morning of November 8th started like any other episode of The View. The studio audience filed in, excited for another round of celebrity interviews and hot topic discussions. The show's signature red couches gleamed under the professional lighting. Camera operators checked their angles. Sound engineers adjusted their levels. In the control room, producers reviewed their rundown, confident they had another smooth show ahead. Tom Cruise wasn't scheduled to arrive until 9:47 a.m. for the 10:15 segment, but true to his legendary reputation, he walked through the studio doors at 8:30, not with an entourage of handlers and assistants, but with a single publicist and a warm smile that immediately disarmed the staff. "Morning, everyone," he called out, that famous voice carrying easily across the studio floor. "Hope I'm not too early." The crew members exchanged glances. They'd seen hundreds of celebrities come through these doors. The divas who demanded specific water temperatures, the method actors who refused to break character, the social media stars who spent more time checking their phones than talking to anyone. But Tom Cruise? He was shaking hands with the camera operators, learning the names of production assistants, asking the makeup artist about her weekend. "Mr. Cruise, you really didn't have to come so early," the segment producer stammered, clearly flustered by the A-lister's genuine warmth. "Tom, please," he corrected with that megawatt smile. "And I like to get a feel for the space. Plus, I wanted to make sure I wasn't rushing anyone. Your time is valuable too." Little did he know that his early arrival would become the calm before an unprecedented storm. The hosts began arriving around 9 a.m. Whoopi Goldberg came first, immediately lighting up when she saw Tom. They'd worked together on a charity initiative for underprivileged children, and their reunion was genuinely warm. Sarah Haynes followed, excited about the interview. Even Sunny Hostin, usually the most reserved of the panel, seemed animated by the prospect of talking with someone of Tom's caliber. And then Joy Behar made her entrance. Those who knew Joy well recognized something in the way she surveyed the scene. That calculating look, that slight smile that never quite reached her eyes. She greeted Tom politely enough too. Politely, some would later recall. Professional, measured, but there was something underneath. Something the veteran crew members had seen before. Joy Behar was locked and loaded. "Tom, wonderful to have you," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, businesslike. "Joy, thanks for having me," Tom replied, his warmth never faltering. "I've been a fan of the show for years. You all keep it real, and I respect that." Joy's smile widened slightly. "Oh, we definitely keep it real here. That's our specialty." The words hung in the air just a moment too long. Whoopi glanced at Joy, something unreadable flickering across her face. But the moment passed, and the pre-show bustle resumed. Tom settled into the green room, reviewing talking points with his publicist. The new film, Shockwave Protocol, was his passion project, a return to the hard-edged action that had made him a household name, combined with a deeper exploration of the moral cost of violence. He'd done extensive research, trained for 8 months, performed stunts that insurance companies had explicitly forbidden. At 58 years old, he was proving that dedication and discipline could defy time itself. They'll probably ask about the stunts, his publicist mentioned, scanning her notes. Maybe some questions about the younger cast members you're mentoring. Standard stuff. Tom nodded, his mind already elsewhere. He was thinking about a particular sequence in the film, a moment of vulnerability he'd fought to keep in the final cut. A scene where his character breaks down, showing the psychological toll of decades of violence. It was the kind of honest moment that big-budget action films usually cut, but Tom had insisted. It was real. It was human. It mattered. He had no idea that real was about to take on an entirely different meaning. At 10:12 a.m., Tom was escorted to the set. The audience erupted in applause, genuine, enthusiastic appreciation for a star they'd watched for decades. He waved, smiled, and settled into the designated guest seat with practiced ease. The lights were warm. The atmosphere was electric. This was what he did. This was easy. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began, her smile radiant. "We are so thrilled to have Tom Cruise with us today." "Tom, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," Tom replied, his posture relaxed, his demeanor open. "This is fantastic." The first 8 minutes were textbook perfect. They discussed Shockwave Protocol. Tom shared amusing anecdotes from set, the stunt that went slightly wrong, the young co-star who'd been terrified of heights until Tom spent 3 weeks personally training with her, the director's obsessive attention to practical effects. The audience laughed in all the right places. The energy was positive, warm, engaging. Sarah asked about his training regimen. Tom deflected with characteristic humility, redirecting credit to his stunt team, his trainers, the dedicated professionals who made him look good. Sonny inquired about mentoring the next generation of action stars, and Tom spoke passionately about the responsibility of passing down not just techniques, but values, the importance of respecting your crew, honoring your commitments, putting in the work when nobody's watching. And Joy Behar sat there, unusually quiet, watching, waiting. Those familiar with her interview style recognized the pattern. She was like a boxer in the early rounds, studying her opponent, looking for the opening. Her colleagues were carrying the conversation, building rapport, creating comfort, and Joy was letting them, because she knew that comfort was the predecessor to vulnerability. The audience had no idea. The other hosts were blissfully engaged. Even Tom, despite all his media training and decades of interview experience, didn't see it coming. But at the 10-minute mark, Joy leaned forward slightly. Her posture changed. The temperature in the studio dropped by several degrees, though nobody could have explained exactly why. "Tom," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the warm conversation. "Can I ask you something?" The phrasing alone should have been a warning. Not "I have a question" or "let me ask you about," but "can I ask you something?" The false politeness of requesting permission for something she was going to do regardless. Tom turned to her, still smiling, still open. "Of course. You talk a lot about values and responsibility," Joy continued, her tone conversational but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "About mentoring the next generation, about putting in the work. But I'm curious, how do you reconcile that with some of the choices you've made in your personal life?" The air shifted, palpably, undeniably. Whoopi's eyes widened slightly. Sarah's smile froze. Sonny's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her note card. In the control room, a producer muttered, "Oh God, here we go." But Tom remained composed. His smile didn't falter, though something in his eyes, something subtle, something steely, suggested he understood exactly what was happening. "I'm not sure I followed, Joy," he said evenly. "What choices are you referring to?" Joy leaned back, clearly relishing the moment. "Well, you've been married 3 times. You've had very public relationships that ended in very public ways. You've been involved in, let's call it what it is, some controversial organizations and belief systems that many people find troubling. And yet here you are, talking about values and mentorship as if Joy Whoopi tried to intervene, her voice carrying a warning note. But Joy wasn't finished. As if you're some kind of moral authority. I'm just wondering if you see the contradiction there, because a lot of people watching might see it. The studio held its breath. This wasn't a question. It was an ambush, carefully constructed and deliberately deployed. A personal attack wrapped in the veneer of legitimate journalism, designed to provoke, to embarrass, to score points with viewers who loved seeing celebrities taken down a peg. Tom Cruise sat perfectly still for 3 full seconds. His expression didn't change. His posture didn't shift. But everyone in that studio, from the audience members in the back row to the camera operators behind their equipment to the host sitting mere feet away, felt something change in the man beside them. "Joy," he said quietly, his voice measured and controlled. That's an interesting way to frame a question. It wasn't anger in his tone. Not yet. It was something more dangerous. Absolute clarity. The voice of a man who just realized exactly what kind of conversation this was going to be and was calculating his response with the precision of someone who'd spent decades navigating Hollywood's treacherous waters. "I'm just asking," Joy pressed, sensing she'd drawn blood but not yet satisfied. "You put yourself out there as this example of dedication and professionalism, but your personal life tells a very different story, doesn't it? 3 marriages, Tom, 3 divorces. That's not exactly the picture of stability you're trying to sell here." "Joy, that's really not," Sarah started, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading. "No, it's fine," Tom interjected, his voice still calm but with a new undercurrent that made everyone pay closer attention. "Joy wants to have a conversation about personal life versus professional conduct. I'm happy to have that conversation." He shifted in his seat slightly, turning to face Joy more directly. The movement was subtle, but it changed the entire dynamic. This was no longer a casual interview. This was a confrontation, and Tom Cruise had just accepted the challenge. "First," he said, his words measured and deliberate, "yes, I've been married 3 times. Each of those marriages ended for private reasons that I've never discussed publicly, because I respect the people involved too much to turn their pain into entertainment. But let me ask you something. Joy, do you believe that someone's marital history disqualifies them from having professional integrity?" "I'm not saying it disqualifies you," Joy shot back, clearly enjoying this. "I'm saying there's a disconnect between the image and the reality. You can't stand there." "I'm sitting." "Actually," Tom interrupted, and there was the faintest edge of steel in that correction. "But please, continue." Joy's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being interrupted. Wasn't used to guests who pushed back. Most celebrities either crumbled under her questioning or retreated into publicist-approved deflections. But Tom Cruise was doing neither, and she could feel her control of the situation slipping. "You're involved with an organization that many people consider to be a cult," she pressed on, dropping any pretense of subtlety now. "An organization with a very troubling history of—" "Stop." One word. Quiet. Final. Tom Cruise's demeanor had shifted. The friendly movie star was gone. In his place sat someone else entirely, someone harder, someone who'd survived 4 decades in an industry that chewed up and spit out lesser talents, someone who'd finally decided that silence was no longer an option. "Here's what we're really doing here, Joy," he said, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable weight. "We're not having a conversation about professional conduct or personal values. What you're doing, and everyone watching knows, it is trying to score points by attacking someone's private life and religious beliefs on live television. Is that accurate?" Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Tom continued, his words precise and cutting. "Because if we're going to have that conversation, let's have it honestly. You want to talk about my marriages? Fine. I've been divorced. Each time was painful. Each time, I tried my best, and it didn't work out. I've never claimed to be perfect in my personal life, Joy, but I show up to work on time. I treat every person on every set with respect. I've never once missed a day of filming due to unprofessional behavior. I've mentored dozens of young actors and stunt performers, many of whom are now thriving in their careers. That's what I'm selling, not perfection, professionalism." The audience was dead silent. Whoopi and Sarah exchanged glances, both clearly uncertain whether to intervene or let this play out. Sunny was frozen, her eyes wide. But Joy Behar, emboldened by years of television combat and convinced of her position's righteousness, made a fatal tactical error. She doubled down. "That's a very convenient distinction," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Personal versus professional. But Tom, your association with what, Joy? Say it clearly. What organization are you referring to? You know exactly what I'm talking about." "I do, but I want everyone watching to understand exactly what you're doing here. You're attacking my religious beliefs. On live television, in front of millions of people, because it plays well with your audience, doesn't it? Because it's easy. Because I'm sitting here, and you've got home court advantage, and your producers probably thought this would make great television." Tom's voice had risen slightly, not in volume, but in intensity. Each word was precise, each sentence a surgical strike. "You want to question my professional conduct? Show me one person, one crew member, one co-star, one director who'll say I've ever been anything less than completely committed and respectful on set. You want to discuss my personal life? Okay, but then let's discuss yours too, Joy. Let's talk about everyone's messy divorces and private struggles and the things we'd all rather keep private. Or we can recognize that maybe, just maybe, attacking someone's deepest personal beliefs for entertainment purposes is exactly the kind of thing that makes people distrust media." Joy's face had gone slightly red. She was a veteran of 1,000 television battles, but something about Tom Cruise's controlled intensity was throwing her off balance. She'd expected defensiveness or retreat. Instead, she'd gotten a systematic dismantling of her approach, delivered with devastating precision. "I'm a journalist," she started. "You're a television host," Tom corrected. And now there was no mistaking the edge in his voice. "Which is fine. It's an important job. But let's not pretend this is investigative journalism. This is entertainment television, and you just tried to use someone's personal pain and private beliefs as a weapon. Why? What did you think was going to happen here?" The other hosts were frozen. Whoopi had her hand partially raised, as if to intervene, but she was clearly torn between her role as moderator and her evident sympathy for Tom's position. Sarah was staring at Joy with an expression that might have been shock or might have been anger. Sunny had actually shifted her chair slightly away from Joy, a subconscious physical distancing from what was unfolding. In the audience, people were leaning forward, completely transfixed. This wasn't the usual celebrity interview. This was real conflict, real emotion, real stakes playing out in real time. Some faces showed clear discomfort. Others wore expressions of satisfaction, as if they'd been waiting years to see someone stand up to Joy Behar's particular brand of confrontational interviewing. Joy, sensing that she was losing control of the narrative, tried a different approach. Her voice softened, became almost conciliatory. "Tom, I'm not attacking you. I'm asking legitimate questions that many people have." "No." Tom cut her off, and this time when he spoke, his voice had dropped to a whisper-quiet intensity that was somehow more powerful than any shout could have been. "No, Joy, don't hide behind many people. You don't get to launch personal attacks and then hide behind the fig leaf of just asking questions. Own what you're doing. You wanted to take down Tom Cruise on live television. You wanted a moment. You wanted to be the person who finally made me crack. Fine, you got your moment. But understand something." He leaned forward slightly, and the physical movement carried enormous weight. This was a man who'd performed death-defying stunts, who'd trained with world champion fighters, who'd built an empire through sheer force of will and unrelenting discipline. And all of that power was now focused entirely on Joy Behar. "I've been doing this for 40 years, Tom continued, his voice steady as a rock. 40 years of 18-hour days and broken bones, and learning thousands of skills because I refuse to do anything halfway. 40 years of showing up when I'm exhausted, injured, or dealing with personal tragedy because I made a commitment to people who depend on me. 40 years of watching this industry chew up people with 10 times the talent but half the work ethic. And in all those years, through all those challenges, I have never compromised my professional standards." He paused, and the silence was deafening. "You want to judge my personal life? Go ahead. You want to mock my beliefs? That's your right. But do not sit there and imply that my personal choices somehow invalidate everything I've built, everything I've accomplished, everything I've given to this craft. Because that's not journalism, Joy. That's just cruelty dressed up as conversation." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Joy's mouth opened, then closed. For perhaps the first time in The View's history, Joy Behar was genuinely speechless. But Tom Cruise wasn't finished, not even close. He stood up. The movement was fluid, controlled, but it fundamentally changed the power dynamic in the room. No longer a guest in their space, he was now a man on his feet, claiming his own authority. "You know what the real issue is here?" he said, his voice now filling the studio with a force that made even the cameras seem to lean in. "The real issue is that we live in a culture that celebrates tearing people down, that rewards cheap shots and gotcha moments. That turns private pain into public spectacle and calls it entertainment." He turned slightly, addressing not just Joy now, but the entire panel, the audience, the cameras themselves. "I came here today to talk about a film I'm proud of. A film that took 3 years of my life, that employed 300 people, that represents everything I believe cinema can be. And instead, we're talking about my divorces and my religious beliefs, because somewhere along the way, we decided that the private lives of public figures are fair game for public dissection." "Tom, if you just..." Joy tried again, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Let me finish," Tom said, not loudly, but with such absolute authority that Joy actually recoiled slightly. "You want to have a conversation about responsibility? Let's talk about media responsibility. Let's talk about the responsibility you have, sitting in that chair, with that platform, to treat people with basic human decency. To recognize that yes, I'm a celebrity. Yes, I've chosen a public life. But I'm also a human being with feelings and vulnerabilities and private pain that I have every right to keep private." His voice was shaking now, not with anger, but with something deeper, a righteous fury born of decades of accumulated frustration, of watching this same playbook used on countless colleagues, of finally reaching the point where silence felt more damaging than speaking out. "You know what I've learned in 40 years, Joy? I've learned that the people who talk most about other people's flaws are usually trying to distract from their own. I've learned that cruelty is easy and kindness is hard. I've learned that integrity isn't about never making mistakes, it's about how you handle yourself when you do. And I've learned that at some point, you have to stand up and say, enough." The studio was absolutely silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a single sound except Tom Cruise's voice, resonating with decades of conviction. "So here's what I'm going to do," he continued, reaching down to unclip his microphone with steady hands. "I'm going to leave. Not because I'm running away from a difficult conversation, but because this stopped being a conversation the moment you decided to weaponize my personal life for ratings. And I'm going to say something directly to the people watching at home." He looked straight into the main camera, his eyes intense, his presence magnetic. "If you're out there, struggling with a divorce, or questioning your beliefs, or trying to figure out how to balance your private struggles with your public responsibilities, you're not alone. Your mistake don't define you. Your messy personal life doesn't invalidate your professional accomplishment. And you deserve better than to be reduced to sound bites and scandal by people who've never walked in your shoes." He set the microphone down on the chair with careful precision, a small gesture that carried enormous symbolic weight. Then he turned back to Joy one final time. "Joy, I genuinely hope you're proud of this moment. I hope the ratings are worth it. Because this," he gestured at the space between them, "this is exactly what's wrong with how we talk to each other in this country. We've forgotten that there are human beings on the other side of our questions. We've forgotten kindness. We've forgotten grace." His voice dropped again, back to that dangerous whisper-quiet intensity. "But I haven't forgotten, and I won't let anyone, not you, not this show, not anyone make me forget that." Tom Cruise turned and walked toward the studio exit. His pace was measured, unhurried, dignified. He wasn't fleeing, he was making a choice, and every person in that studio understood the difference. Behind him, the panel sat in stunned silence. Joy's face had cycled from red to pale, her expression frozen somewhere between defiance and dawning realization of what had just happened. Whoopi looked like she wanted to call out to Tom, to apologize, to somehow fix what had broken. Sarah was openly crying. Sunny simply stared at her hands. The audience was divided. Some sat with mouths agape, processing what they'd witnessed. Others were already reaching for phones, knowing they'd just seen something that would dominate social media for days. A few were applauding softly at first, then louder, until perhaps a third of the audience was on their feet, clapping for a man who'd just chosen dignity over compliance. Tom reached the studio door and paused. Just for a moment. He looked back over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the space one last time. Then, without a word, he pushed through the door and was gone. The heavy studio door swung closed behind him with a soft but final thud. For 5 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The show that prided itself on never running out of opinions, on always having something to say, was utterly, completely silent. Then, chaos. What started as a routine celebrity interview became a watershed moment in morning television. What began as a calculated attempt to create controversy became instead a powerful statement about dignity, respect, and the cost of public life. In the days that followed, the footage went viral, not just the confrontation itself, but Tom Cruise's final speech, his calm dismantling of Joy Behar's tactics, his passionate defense of basic human decency. Think pieces were written. Debates raged on social media. The clip was shared millions of times, with people from all walks of life weighing in on who was right, who was wrong, and what it all meant. Joy Behar issued a statement that evening, calling the exchange a robust conversation between two strong personalities and defending her questioning as journalism. The statement was widely mocked. Many pointed out that Tom Cruise had systematically explained exactly why it wasn't journalism, and Joy's defensive posturing only proved his point. The other hosts of The View were noticeably quiet in the immediate aftermath, though Sarah Haynes later posted a cryptic message on social media. Some days you witness courage in unexpected places. Tom Cruise didn't issue a statement. He didn't need to. His words in that studio had said everything that needed saying. Instead, he returned to work on Shockwave Protocol promotions, conducting subsequent interviews with other outlets, where he was treated with the respect he demanded and deserved. Shockwave Protocol went on to become one of the year's biggest hits, with many crediting the viral confrontation for driving audiences to see a film that showcased not just Tom Cruise the action star, but Tom Cruise the artist, the craftsman, the man who'd proven that discipline and dedication could create something extraordinary. As for The View, the show continued, but something had shifted. A line had been crossed, and everyone knew it. Joy Behar remained a host, but her questioning style noticeably softened in the weeks that followed. Whether this was genuine reflection or simply public relations, damage control remained a subject of debate. But what nobody could debate was this. Tom Cruise had walked into that studio as a movie star and walked out as something more, a symbol of what it looks like when someone finally says enough to a culture of cruelty masquerading as conversation. The confrontation lasted less than 15 minutes, but its impact will be felt for far longer. Was Tom Cruise right to walk out? Did Joy Behar cross a line? Or was she simply doing her job? Was this a triumph of personal dignity over media aggression? Or a celebrity using his platform to avoid legitimate scrutiny? The answers, like most things worth discussing, aren't simple. But what is simple? What became crystal clear in that studio on that November morning is that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand up, speak your truth, and walk away with your integrity intact. Tom Cruise did exactly that. And in doing so, he reminded us all what real strength looks like.